From the alien commander demanded silence until a human spoke, and every warrior listened. The world of Zytherian groaned beneath the weight of war. Once a lush world of sapphire seas and crystal forests, it was now little more than a battlefield scarred by orbital bombardments and chemical fire. Across its broken plains, the Galactic Legion, an army formed from 27 species, assembled for what they all knew would be the decisive battle of the campaign. The air trembled with energy fields, alien banners swaying in the hot wind, each marked with symbols of power, lineage, and conquest. And among them, for the first time in the Legion's long and merciless history, stood a human, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, Earth Defense Corps, a name that meant nothing to the galaxy, but one day would echo in its every corner. He stood on the fringe of the formation, a dark silhouette against the burning horizon. His armor was simple, no plasma plating, no reactive shields, no living metal symbionts like the others wore. Just a reinforced combat suit built for gravity, not glory. In the midst of the towering alien warriors, Marcus looked fragile, small, even, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled those who dared to look too long. Something that said he had already seen the end of worlds. Around him, the alien soldiers prepared in ritualistic silence. The Gorvaks sharpened their talons with sparks of heat. The crystalline Valorians hummed low tones of synchronization, their voices a harmonic prayer. The insectoids' wrath cleaned their weapons with the precision of machines. They all followed the same command: silence. The High Commander Vorkal had decreed it. No voice was to be raised. No cry, no shout, no chant. Only obedience. The galaxy's finest army waited like statues under the crimson dusk. The air smelled of metal, ozone, and tension so thick it hummed in the bones. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Marcus watched it all in silence, hands clasped behind his back. His translator implant picked up the ambient signals. Thousands of unspoken thoughts flickering through the Legion's tactical net. The aliens communicated through pulses, clicks, or telepathic bursts. To them, silence was discipline. To humans, it was suffocation. He had been here 3 days and had spoken less than a dozen words. Every time he opened his mouth, the nearest officer would stiffen or glance toward him as if he were about to commit blasphemy. The Legion respected only strength, and strength to them was control. But Marcus knew a different kind of strength, the kind that came from chaos, from noise, from the heartbeat before death. He had seen it in the eyes of men and women on Earth, standing in trenches under orbital bombardment, laughing between explosions because laughter was all that kept them human. He missed that sound. He missed the sound of life. As night fell, the alien camps lit with bioluminescent towers. Giant war machines rested in cradles of steel and magnetic fields. Overhead, the fleet moved in orbital patterns, shadows gliding across a bleeding moon. The Legion waited for dawn when the Zereth Dominion would descend, bringing annihilation. Marcus sat alone near the edge of the camp, staring at the flickering horizon. The others avoided him, not out of hatred, but discomfort. The human made them uneasy. He breathed too loud, moved too freely, felt too much. He tapped a small metal charm on his wrist, a keepsake from Earth, a battered dog tag engraved with a single phrase: "Speak, always speak." The words echoed in his mind, a memory of his father, an old infantry sergeant from the First Lunar War. When you're surrounded, his father had said, when the world wants your silence, that's when your voice matters most. Marcus looked toward the command tent, where Vorkal's silhouette loomed, massive, horned, and terrible against the flickering lights. The commander species, the Rinka, were built like living fortresses, 8 feet tall, skin like obsidian plates, eyes that glowed from within. To them, emotion was weakness. They believed in absolute control, absolute order, and they had built their army to reflect that. The Legion would obey to the death. But Marcus wondered, would they believe? At midnight, the first tremor shook the ground. Not from battle, yet, but from the shifting tectonics of Zytherian itself. The planet was dying, cracked open by endless warfare. The stars above were clouded by debris, their light dimmed by smoke. Marcus rose and walked toward the edge of the plateau. Below, the vast army glimmered, thousands of alien life forms ready to fight, each species distinct yet bound by command. He could feel their tension, their exhaustion. They were magnificent, yes, but hollow, warriors without a voice. He imagined what they could be if someone reminded them what they fought for. Behind him, a voice rasped through the air. "You are out of formation, human." Marcus turned slowly. A Valerian lieutenant, body crystalline and refracting the camp's light, stood with a faint hum. Its voice came through the translator as melodic yet cold. "Apologies," Marcus said. "Couldn't sleep." "Sleep is unnecessary. Focus is required. The commander decrees silence. You will comply." Marcus looked out at the endless night. "He fears noise," he murmured. The Valerian tilted its head, confused. "Noise is chaos. Chaos breeds failure." Marcus smiled faintly. "Chaos also breeds life." The alien said nothing more. It simply turned and glided away, unnerved by the strange human logic. Marcus remained alone under the fractured stars, listening to the hum of alien machinery. The silence pressed down like a physical weight. He thought of Earth again, its messy, loud, defiant people. Humanity had always been too noisy for the universe's liking, too emotional, too unpredictable, too alive, and yet it was that very noise that kept him from extinction again and again. He whispered to himself, almost unconsciously, "The universe has forgotten what a voice can do." As dawn crept across Itherian, the Legion stirred. Massive engines roared to life, banners unfurled, and the armies began to assemble. The High Commander emerged from his command tent, armor gleaming with energy veins, his shadow stretching across 100 soldiers. Vorkal's gaze swept the ranks, his presence alone silencing even the hum of machinery. When he spoke, his voice was amplified by sonic resonance, deep enough to shake dust from the ground. "Today, we crush the Zereth Dominion. Today, the legions will is absolute. You will obey. You will fight. You will speak only when commanded." A unified thrum of energy pulsed through the ranks as the soldiers bowed their heads. The silence returned, perfect, absolute, suffocating. Marcus stood at attention, jaw clenched, heart hammering. Every instinct in him screamed to break that silence, to say something, anything, but he didn't. Not yet. He looked across the faces, if they could be called faces, of the beings beside him. He saw pride, fear, exhaustion. He saw soldiers who had forgotten what it meant to fight for something beyond orders. He would wait. He would listen. And when the time came, when silence became unbearable, he would speak. Because humans had always been good at one thing above all others, finding their voice when the universe demanded quiet. The twin suns of Itherian rose like molten eyes, glaring down on the Legion gathered across the scorched plains. The planet trembled beneath the weight of their assembled power. Tens of thousands of alien warriors arrayed in perfect formation, gleaming under the morning light. And at the front of it all, the High Commander Vorkal stood upon a raised command platform, his armor gleaming black and gold, his presence heavy enough to make lesser species avert their gaze. When he moved, the ground seemed to pulse. When he spoke, even the storm winds hesitated. The Legion revered him and feared him. At his gesture, the resonance field ignited, a sonic network that linked every soldier's mind to commander's will. It thrummed like a living heartbeat. Silence descended instantly, absolute and complete. Even the human's breath felt too loud. Vorkal began to speak, his voice amplified across the battlefield by the Legion's mind-link network. His words rolled like thunder. Sons and daughters of the Legion, warriors of 27 worlds. Today we purge weakness. Today we end chaos. Today we speak only in victory. The ranks responded not with sound, but with synchronized movements, each species performing its own gesture of allegiance. The Valorians pulsed light from their crystalline bodies. The Gorvaks slammed their armored fists into the ground. The Zrath extended their bladed limbs in salute. Only one figure stood still, Lieutenant Marcus Hale. Vorkal's burning eyes found him easily. The human was an aberration among the sea of aliens, too small, too still, too alive. The commander turned his gaze fully toward Marcus. The translator nodes around the field began to buzz, preparing to interpret the fury that followed. "Human," Vorkal rumbled. You stand in the ranks of the Legion, yet you do not move as they do. You are silent but not obedient. You breathe as if you question my command. The words were not a question. They were a warning. Marcus stood straight, shoulders squared, his hands clasped behind his back. With respect, Commander, he said evenly, I breathe because I'm alive. A ripple went through the Legion. The psychic field trembled with shared unease. No one addressed the High Commander directly. Vorkal's claws dug into the metal railing of the platform. Sparks hissed from the impact. You mistake tolerance for acceptance, human. You were invited to observe, not to speak. The Legion does not need words. It needs victory. Marcus didn't flinch. Words build victory, he replied quietly. You can't fight for something you can't say out loud. Gasps, or their alien equivalents, spread through the ranks. The resonance field stuttered for a fraction of a second, flickering between frequencies. The silence wavered, fractured by a single human sentence. Vorkal descended from the platform with a sound like an earthquake. The ground cracked under his weight as he approached the human, towering over him like a walking mountain of armor and fury. His four glowing eyes blazed down at Marcus. You think your primitive tongue has meaning here, the commander hissed. You are an infant species, screaming at the cosmos because you fear it. We are beyond such noise. Marcus looked up, meeting that burning gaze. Maybe, he said, but noise is life. Silence is death. The alien commander froze, not out of fear, but disbelief. The Legion around them stood perfectly still, uncertain whether to intervene. You will remain silent, Vorkal growled, or I will have you removed from this field. The translator rendered his words as calm, but every tone carried lethal threat. Marcus exhaled slowly. With respect, sir, I'll remain silent when silence earns victory. Vorkal turned sharply away, his massive shoulders shaking with restrained fury. He stomped back toward the command platform and slammed his staff into the ground. The sonic shockwave rippled outward, forcing even the largest species to kneel. Enough! The field went still. Even the wind died. Vorkal raised his weapon high. You will obey. You will fight. You will kill. And you will do so in silence. That is how wars are won. That is how legions endure. Marcus watched him, not with rebellion, but with understanding. The commander wasn't wrong in his own way. Silence did bring order, but it also killed the soul. He looked across the ranks, at the crystalline soldiers whose light dimmed with each order, at the insectoid warriors whose wings hung limp, at the reptilian beasts who kept their jaws clenched in obedience. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were statues, and statues didn't win wars. As the formation broke to prepare for deployment, Marcus remained where he stood. The Legion sub-commanders whisper among themselves, their alien tones sharp and cold. The human's defiance would not be forgotten nor forgiven. A Zrath captain, its voice a series of clicks, approached him. You should not have spoken, it said. He could have ended you with a word. Marcus turned his head slightly. He didn't. The Zrath's wings buzzed uncertainly. You are reckless. Marcus gave a faint, humorless smile. I'm human. The alien didn't understand, but it sensed something deeper in the human's words. Something unquantifiable. Something that made logic feel small. Inside his command tent, Vorkal paced like a caged beast. The echoes of the human's defiance burned through his mind. No one had ever challenged him. Not even the warlords of the Zereth Dominion dared to defy his command so openly. And yet, he could not shake the echo of the human's words. Noise is life. Silence is death. The phrase stuck like a splinter in his mind. He growled, slamming his clawed hand into the table. Arrogant creature, he muttered. You will learn your place. But part of him, the smallest, most reluctant part, wondered if perhaps the human's voice had carried something he himself had forgotten long ago. Something like purpose. Outside, the army readied for war. Massive transports lifted into the blood-red sky, engines screaming. The ground forces formed lines stretching for kilometers. The Zereth fleet was descending through orbit, its dark ships blotting out the sun. The Legion's silence deepened as the enemy approached. Fear pulsed faintly through the resonance field, A single note of unease. The commander felt it, but ignored it. He demanded perfection. He demanded stillness. But in the middle of that quiet army, one heartbeat stood apart. Marcus Hale checked his rifle, adjusted his gear, and whispered words that no one else could hear. "Talk to me, Earth. Just once more." His voice was low, human, alive, a sound that shouldn't have mattered in the sea of alien discipline. And yet, somewhere in the ranks, one of the crystalline Valorians turned its head, faintly curious. A Gorvak warrior flexed its claws, an unfamiliar spark in its eyes. The silence cracked, just a hairline fracture, invisible but real. The storm was coming, and the universe was about to remember the power of a human voice. The horizon of Zytherian burned. The Zereth Dominion's fleet had begun its descent, black ships that blotted out the stars, their engines rumbling like the heartbeat of doom. The ground itself trembled under the pressure of orbital bombardments. The Legion stood in perfect formation, armor gleaming, weapons charged, ranks motionless, and silent, always silent. Commander Vorkal stood at the head of the army, his staff of command raised high, a dark silhouette against the burning sky. His voice boomed across the psychic net, cold, discipline, absolute. Hold your ranks. Remember the code. You fight as one. You think as one. You are one. The ranks trembled in unison. 1,000 minds obeyed a single command. The resonance field pulsed, uniting them all under the commander's will. But Marcus Hale felt the emptiness in that pulse. He felt the fear buried beneath obedience, the quiet despair that came from fighting without belief. He looked around him, at the Valorians whose light had dimmed to dull gray, at the Zrath whose wings lay folded in submission, at the Gorvak, those proud, clawed warriors who now looked to ground instead of the sky. They were an army without a soul, and Marcus knew that no army, no matter how vast, could win without one. The first bombardment struck the ridge behind them, throwing waves of molten dust into the air. Alien engines roared to life. The Legion braced and waited. The next volley came closer. The sky turned white. Energy shields flared as shock waves rippled through the ranks. The silence held, but it was cracking. Marcus could feel it. Then came the scream of the Zereth infantry dropships, descending like meteors. The enemy had arrived. Black armored figures poured out of the sky, hissing through their comms. A tide of death. Vorkal raised his hand. "Hold," he roared. The army obeyed, motionless as statues, waiting for his order. Marcus watched them, a sea of power waiting to be unleashed, but trapped behind fear. He clenched his fists. His chest burned. He could no longer bear the silence. He took one step forward, then another, and then he spoke. "If silence wins wars," he said, voice calm but carrying, "then why do you keep losing them?" The words cut through the air like a blade. Every head turned. Alien eyes, luminous sensors, crystal faces, all turning toward the small human standing alone before the commander. Vorkal froze. His claws dug into the earth. "You dare!" But Marcus didn't stop. He couldn't. You say silence is strength, that obedience brings victory. But what I see are soldiers too afraid to speak, too afraid to feel. You call this unity? It's a graveyard. The resonance field faltered. Psychic dissonance rippled through the ranks. Translators flickered. Heartbeats quickened. For the first time, the Legion's perfect rhythm broke. Marcus's voice grew stronger. "You've been told to fight like machines. But machines don't win wars. Hearts do. Belief does. The will to live, that's what makes warriors." Vorkal's roar split the air, a sonic boom of fury. Silence. He swung his command staff, slamming it into the ground. The resulting shockwave knocked dust into the sky. Many soldiers staggered back, stunned. Marcus stood his ground. "You can command silence, Commander," he said, voice steady even as the ground shook. "But you can't command courage." The field went still. The only sound was the crackle of plasma fire in the distance. The commander took a step forward, towering over him. "You think courage is noise," he hissed. Marcus met his gaze. "No, courage is voice. The voice that says, 'I'm still here,' when the universe tells you to vanish." He turned, looking out at the ranks of the Legion. His voice rose, carried by the broken resonance field, echoing in 1,000 minds. You, all of you, have lost worlds, families, entire histories. And you still fight. That's not silence. That's defiance. That's what makes you alive. The Valorian's crystals began to glow brighter, faintly at first, then stronger. The Zrath's wings trembled, resonating with low vibrations. The Gorvak lifted their heads, claws flexing. Something ancient and powerful stirred among them. Marcus raised his voice again, and it wasn't a speech. It was a heartbeat made of words. The enemy believes we are broken, that our silence means surrender. But I say this. He slammed his fist against his chest plate. As long as one of us can still speak, as long as one of us can still stand, then no one, not even the gods, can silence us. The resonance field shattered, not in failure, but in liberation. The sound that erupted next wasn't chaos. It was unity. The Gorvak roared. The Zrath screamed their battle songs. The Valorians pulsed beams of light into the air. The sound became thunder, rolling across the plains like the voice of a living world. The Legion, silent no more, had found its soul again. Vorkal staggered back, overwhelmed by the sheer force of sound. His control, his perfect order, was gone, but in its place, something stronger had risen. For the first time in his long military life, Vorkal felt something like awe. He lowered his weapon slowly, eyes glowing with conflicted light. You have broken the Legion's silence, he said softly, and yet they listen to you. Marcus turned toward him, breathing hard. No, he said, they're not listening to me. They're listening to themselves. I just reminded them they had voices. Then, from somewhere deep within the Legion ranks, a single alien warrior raised his weapon and bellowed, a sound that shook the dust from the sky. Another joined him, then another. In moments, the battlefield thundered with thousands of alien war cries. It wasn't a human chant, nor an alien one. It was something beyond both, a new sound born from unity. And at its center stood one human, small, unarmored mortal, whose words had cracked the silence of 1,000 worlds. The armies of the Zirith Dominion faltered as the noise reached them. Their calms filled with confusion. Their advance slowed. The Legion's roar spread across the battlefield like wildfire. The High Commander turned to Marcus one last time. If we live through this, Vorkal said, I will never again demand silence. Marcus smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the advancing enemy. Then let's make sure the galaxy hears us. And as the first wave of the Zirith army descended upon them, Marcus raised his rifle, not as an observer, but as a soldier. When the human fired the first shot, every warrior in the Legion followed. The sound that filled the sky was not silence. It was life reborn. The dawn of battle came with no sunrise, only the dim flicker of burning clouds and the cold hum of orbital warships waiting above. The alien host, once divided by pride, now stood united behind a single voice. Not that of Commander Zyron, but a human, Captain Elias Ward. Where there had been confusion, there was now purpose. The soldiers of 30 species, reptilian, avian, crystalline, aquatic, each stood in formation, their banners fluttering under the storming sky. They had mocked humanity once. Now, they watched him in reverence. Elias walked through the ranks without armor, his presence radiating calm strength. His words in the previous night echoed across the encampment. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to stand anyway. Those words had reshaped everything. Even the silent Commander Zyron, whose fury had once threatened to tear the army apart, now observed the human with a warrior's respect. When the enemy came, a swarm of synthetic warforms known as the Vorkal Dominion, they came like a storm of silver shadows. Their ships darkened the sky. Their machines marched in synchronized precision. The ground trembled under mechanical claws. They were not born. They were built, forged to extinguish life, to erase the spark of emotion, the weakness of empathy. But that was where humanity's strength burned brightest. As the first wave hit the front lines, chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the trenches. Energy blasts lit the dust-filled air, and alien battle cries merged into a single storm of defiance. Elias didn't command from the rear. He charged forward, plasma rifle in hand, shouting over the roar of the engines. Hold the line. Not for me, for every world that still remembers freedom. Beside him, Xiron drew his blade, a living weapon of resonant crystal, and roared in his native tongue, the sound shaking the armor of his warriors. It was not fury this time. It was resolve. He fought side by side with the human. He won silenced, the human and the alien, symbols of two galaxies that had never trusted each other, now stood shoulder to shoulder, cutting through machine ranks with relentless precision. Elias's tactics were brutal and efficient, not learned in academies, but carved from centuries of human survival. When the Vorka adapted energy attacks, he switched to kinetic strikes. When they overwhelmed the flanks, he turned retreat into bait and ambush. Every maneuver carried the rhythm of instinct honed through extinction. The alien armies, seeing him fight, began to understand what humanity was. Not the strongest, not the most advanced, but the most enduring, the most stubbornly alive. Hours passed. The battlefield became a graveyard of sparks and blood. Elias took a wound. A shard of metal pierced his side. Yet he pressed on, his movements slower but his eyes burning brighter. Xiron caught him before he fell and shouted, "You cannot die here human." Elias smiled through the pain. "Then fight like I lived, never letting them take what's ours." That moment became legend. The alien host rallied with a cry that echoed across the planet. For humanity, not as subjects, not as allies, but as believers. The Vorka line broke under combined fury. Plasma fire rained like divine judgment, and for the first time in centuries, the machines retreated. Victory was not clean. It was bought with sacrifice, but it was theirs. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood at the center of the battlefield. His uniform scorched, his weapon shattered, but his voice still steady. Xiron approached and knelt, not out of submission, but out of acknowledgement. Around them, warriors of dozens of species did the same. The silence that followed was not commanded. It was earned. Elias looked over the silent host and spoke softly, his voice carrying across the ash-laden wind. "You asked what it means to fight with humanity," he said. "Now you've seen it. It's not our strength or our weapons or our numbers. It's that we remember what we fight for, and we never forget those who fought beside us." For centuries afterward, the story of the battle that remembered humanity spread across worlds. Songs were written in alien tongues that once mocked human fragility. Statues were raised, not to a conqueror, but to a speaker. And in the great halls of the United Armies, when silence fell before a campaign, it was said that every warrior waited, not for orders, but for the echo of a human voice that once defied an empire's command. Because when humanity spoke, even the stars listened.